Hello and welcome to the Pandaverse. I'm E,
I'm C.
and we're here today. We're joined by Champ Westwood, who's an audiobook narrator, and we're here with author Brian Cohn, who has written a couple of books. The one we're going to be talking about most today is The Unraveling of Brendan Meekes. Champ did the audio for that, so that'll be the discussion. So, Brian, first of all, give people a little bit of background and what the book's about and whatever possessed you to write it.
Yeah, so The Unraveling of Brendan Meekes is a first-person narrative written from the point of view of a character, a young man with schizophrenia. And the story kind of takes place right at the moment that he finds out that his sister has been murdered. The police think it's just a mugging and don't really want a whole lot to do with it, but he's convinced that there's more to it. Unfortunately, between the voices in his head and his paranoia and delusions, he gets kind of taken on a wild chase as he tries to figure out who killed his sister. And in the end, the truth ends up somewhere between his delusions and what really happened. He manages to figure it out in the end, but along the way, he goes off on a lot of different tangents. And I think it's a fun book, but at the same time, a book that hopefully gives people a little bit of an insight into the horrible disease that is schizophrenia and the psychosis that goes along with it.
I read a book about schizophrenia. It was told by a guy who experienced schizophrenia. It's called The Eden Express by Mark Vonnegut, who was Kurt Vonnegut Jr.'s son.
Oh, wow.
He experienced paranoia and all the symptoms of schizophrenia while he was a college student. He took a trip across the country and he was dealing with his dad just becoming famous. And part of his psychosis was that he felt like his body was actually processing all the negative energy in the universe.
Wow.
And everything that was going on around him was somehow his fault.
Oh.
How awful that must be to
Right.
feel.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where did your inspiration come from for this book?
So I've been an emergency medicine doctor for 17 years now, and I've encountered quite a few people with schizophrenia in the course of my work. And you know, it's an unfortunate but very interesting disease that I think offers a lot of insight into the way that the mind works when things are working, you know, quote unquote normally, but also when they're working abnormally. And I thought the idea of a mystery novel, a detective novel written from the point of view of someone going through that, having all of these intrusive thoughts and ideas and voices bombarding them as they try to rationally work through something, I thought that would just be a really interesting way to kind of give people an idea of what this disease can be like.
Yeah, I think you did a real good job with that. That book is fantastic.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Very well done.
Thank you.
Indeed.
And then you got Champ over here being all awesome.
I got to say, as a narrator and an actor, I don't just read the books, I act them out and perform them. And taking that journey as Meekes was very anxiety inducing for me as a performer. I had actual anxiety attacks while recording it. You can hear my breathing shift and change. I left them in there. There's some parts you can really tell. But there were moments in this book where I had to pause recording and go for a walk because you just get wrapped up in it. And as an actor, I feel all those emotions and all that anxiety and paranoia. And we were in the middle of a pandemic at its height when I was recording this, was right after the huge wave in December, January, is when this book really took off in earnest in my recording studio. And so all of those thoughts and anxiety just got bundled into this narrative. It was quite a remarkable journey.
That's fantastic that you were able to feel, you know, so much emotion from a book. That right there tells you how powerful words and creativity and just all of that can be, you know, how that has an effect on a reader. And I think that's really important. Brian, I think you did a great job with that, you know, for Champ to feel such emotions from your work. That is just spectacular.
Yeah, I think for you to be able to do this at a time like this, when we're going through this and having to be stuck inside and reading something like that, I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing how you handle a lot of that. I can imagine the emotionality that came out through it.
Yeah, there was a lot. My parents, I tried to share the audiobook with them. They only made it through 2 chapters because there was so much angst and anxiety that it stirred up within them. They couldn't handle it. They asked me to stop and, maybe we'll revisit it someday. But they had quite a visceral reaction to it. And it's unlike any other work I've done before.
Well, Champ, are you going to read for us today?
I absolutely will. I'll read the first chapter for everybody live, which will be really fun.
Fantastic. Yeah.
For sure. That'll be great. I'm looking forward to that.
You wrote a book called The Last Detective, which is published by Panda Moon, and there's an audiobook out for that too. That's a completely different subject matter.
Completely different.
Yeah.
The dystopian thing, it's a detective noir type book, and it's set in the future when the Earth's been invaded by aliens, and they've taken over the Earth. And
another murder mystery, but obviously completely different setting.
Yes.
Completely different characters. For that book, I had the idea that I wanted to write some kind of science fiction noir, sort of mix Humphrey Bogart in with sci-fi in some way. And I had this idea of, well, what about an alien murder mystery? And it sort of took off from there. But obviously completely different from The Unraveling of Brendan Meekes, which is set right here in my current hometown of St. Louis, without aliens or any kind of sci-fi things.
I don't know about that, seeing how there's 143 unexplained phenomena that was released the other day. They could be living amongst you right now. You wrote about them. You made them real.
And now they're mad.
We blame you. It must be pretty cool though, because we haven't been invaded, so yet.
Frost.
Kind of wonder why any aliens would actually want anything to do with us, I mean, we don't even get along with each other.
There are peacekeepers.
Well, I used a Stephen Hawking quote at the beginning of the book, which is that, I can't remember the exact wording, but you don't have to look beyond the human race to understand why we would be afraid of encountering an alien race.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that if they wanted to come here and take us out, they could have done so quite easily by now. So I think they're more of they just kind of watch and make sure we just don't destroy ourselves. So I mean that's my idea of it, but
or them.
Or them. Or them. So who knows?
Yeah.
You know what? I mean, for all we know, Elgon could be an alien.
Well, my sisters always thought that I was an alien baby left on the doorstep.
I don't want to say it would explain some things, but
You start peeling your face off, I'm out of here.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
Hey, Brian, I have a question for you about Meekes. When I was narrating it, sometimes when his intrusive thoughts would come out and his voices would start to speak, they are asking him questions that I, as a reader, actually wanted to know. It almost seemed like they were able to go in and say, why are you being so stupid? And they would ask these questions. What was your inspiration for some of those intrusive thoughts? Was it to kind of guide us along, or what was it?
A little bit of both. Some of it's to guide us along, but a lot of times people with schizophrenia, for the most part, their voices will tell them when they're hearing them or when they're loud, they will tell them awful things. They will say horrible things about them. We always semi-joke in emergency medicine or in medicine. It's unfortunate that these voices aren't telling them things like brush your teeth and floss every day and make sure to eat lots of vegetables. They tend to not be nice voices. They tend to say bad things about them and tell them what horrible people they are. So a lot of the questions are more meant to be sort of rhetorical questions, way for the voices to be saying bad things about Brendan to him.
And what a great name, Brendan Meekes. What a great name.
Yeah, I wanted to be just sort of an average, nice, normal kid, and Brendan and Meekes it felt like a good name for him.
It does. I agree. It sounds like a very nice young kid. Like, I think you did well with that.
Yeah, and this is a disease that can affect anybody, unfortunately. Including nice, normal, and it tends to affect, unfortunately, young people in their early to mid 20s, and it can be people who are going along, having a great normal life, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, bam, this just ruins it.
That's really sad.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that you did, Brian, is you really created a bunch of very colorful characters for Brendan to interact with. Everybody from his crazy sociopathic mother, who, by the way, I voiced my performance based on Moira from Schitt's Creek, if you've ever seen that.
Oh,
Don't
yeah.
do an impression or anything like that, but that kind of crazy, self-centered energy, over-the-top insincerity research. or the veteran with PTSD who won't leave the couch that they found in the alley, the meth addict, a drug dealer. The cast, the Cajun detective, the cast of characters is quite remarkable. Did you go out of your way to create such a colorful cast, or did they just kind of come to you as you went writing it?
They kind of came as I went writing it. I knew I wanted him to be surrounded by people that really had big personalities and that had big things going on. I knew I wanted his mother to be an absolutely horrible person that came across that way. Creek wasn't out yet when I was writing this, or at least I don't think it was out. I hadn't seen it. I have now, but I hadn't at the time. And I had a couple of other TV mothers, though, that reminded me of that, including the Bluth mother from Arrested Development.
Oh my gosh, that's a perfect.
Yeah, over the top, just, not really a good person.
Yeah, no redeeming qualities.
Yeah, but then I wanted his friends, the neighbors, the people that he hung out with to be, good people who maybe had, other things going on that were affecting their life. One of them's got meth addiction, and there's the guy who was PTSD. I wanted them to be a good cast of characters to kind of support him and bolster him up and be kind of the opposite of that mother that's not very supportive and not very nice to him at all.
Yeah, they're very multifaceted, which I really liked about those characters, because like you say, they have so much going on, PTSD, drug addiction, those kinds of things. But you did a really good job of letting their character, their heart shine through, that you can tell. For the most part, you can tell they're good people, but there was always in the back of my mind, as the schizophrenic Brendan Meeks, going, can I really trust that guy? He's got PTSD. He's making bad decisions. Can I really trust her? She's a drug. Like, it was really fun to play with that kind of unreliable narration feel.
Yeah, well, good.
It was fun.
Yeah, I've heard that schizophrenia is caused in some cases by wild chemical imbalances in the body. It's caused by your diet, and maybe you set it off a little bit by taking some types of medication. And
yeah, I don't think so much your diet can do it. Certainly, the symptoms can be exacerbated and made worse by things like substance abuse, methamphetamine, cocaine, things that alter your brain chemistry. But it's more about the chemicals in the brain that cause it. Those things aren't typically diet related necessarily, but certainly, drug addiction and mental health go hand in hand. Unfortunately, a lot of people with schizophrenia end up getting addicted to drugs, which only makes things worse and only makes their lives worse. Brendan obviously managed to stay away from that, and I wanted that to be a big hallmark of his character. Is he's managed to keep away from that side of things, but still plagued by these voices and paranoia and delusions.
Shall we get to this beautiful, wonderful reading? Because we're really excited about it.
Sure.
Yay.
All right, let me fire up the tablet here. Take a drink of water. I'll be good to go.
Oh, yay.
All right, so for everybody listening, this is chapter 1. This is the very first thing you would read or hear, and it really sets up the story. And you'll get it. This is actually Brendan in the middle of an attack. He's super paranoid. He's having an episode, and it's really interesting. So here we go. Chapter 1. They came for me at the end of June. I could feel them closing in as the days grew hotter and more humid, their presence as unbearable as the sweltering afternoons. I hadn't slept at the apartment on Boyle Street in 2 nights. That's the first place they'd look for me. Instead, I spent the first night hidden in an empty pocket of the park, curled up on a bench with my shoes for a pillow, eyes wide, watching every movement, listening for the crunch of feet approaching on the gravel path. Eventually, I fell asleep and awoke to the sun rising over the public restrooms, casting long shadows across the tennis courts and the parking lot. The second night, I went to the Larry Rice shelter, where I was given a cot in a long room that smelled of sweat and feet. The cots were evenly spaced, settled close to one another, and occupied by homeless men. A lot of people call them bums, although I think the proper term is undomiciled. I like that, as if making it sound clinical might take some of the sting out of it. A medical diagnosis rather than a social injustice. Most people avoid them like the plague, but I had no reason to fear these people. They weren't the ones after me. They weren't the ones trying to steal my brain. Staying in the shelter turned out to be a bad idea. I was still awake at 2 a.m, lying on my cot, listening to an old man try to clear his throat a couple of rows over. Sounded like he was trying to start a lawnmower whose engine wouldn't catch. He finally stopped, and in the silence that followed, I could hear voices out in the hallway. They were talking about me. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I knew they were conspiring against me, planning to call them and tell them where I was. I wasn't about to sit around and wait for the inevitable, so I got off the cot and snuck out the window. It wasn't until I was outside in the alley that I realized I'd left my shoes and socks sitting under the bed. Feet slapping against the pavement, I ran down the alley, past dumpsters and abandoned pallets, and took a hard right onto 14th Street, where I dodged a trio of drunk college kids spat out by one of the bars on Washington Avenue. They laughed at me as I ran past, but I didn't hold it against them. After all, I was running around downtown in my bare feet. I probably would have laughed at me too. Realizing I was drawing too much attention to myself, I slowed to a walk and shoved my hands in my pockets, bent my head low, and did my best to blend in. I spotted a black SUV parked beneath a streetlight. Behind the wheel was a girl in her early 20s. She was staring at me. She pulled out her cell phone and started punching numbers, so I took off running again. I took 14th down to the railroad tracks, hoping to get off the streets, and slowed to a walk once again. Sharp gravel shifted and crunched beneath me like broken glass, cutting the soles of my feet and rubbing the skin on the bottom of my toes raw. I tried walking on the track itself, but the iron rail was too thin, like trying to balance on a beam the width of a deck of cards. So I gave up and risked the grassy patch between the tracks and the road. Eventually, the grass ran out as the track continued onto a bridge over the street below. I cut down an embankment and crossed the street, entered a vacant lot on the other side, and crossed to where it ended at the next street over. Once there, I hid behind a bush and peered out onto the street. It was deserted. But that didn't mean much. One step out onto the pavement, and they would spot me. They'd swarm me and tackle me and shove me in the back of a car, take me to a brightly lit sterile room, and strap me down to a cold metal table. That's where they'd cut off my head and remove my brain, and that's the very thing I was trying to avoid. I liked my brain right where it was, thank you very much. I squatted there, behind the bush on the edge of the vacant lot, trying to decide what my next move should be. That's when I saw it. It was still 1 block over, but I could see the sign as plain as day. It was brightly lit against the darkness of the empty street, a white castle on a field of blue. The castle, it meant sanctuary and safety. And blue was the color of peace, the color of God. I had found reprieve at last, and I knew that rest was close at hand. I picked up the broken pieces of my courage amidst the shards of fear and paranoia, and decided it was worth the risk. I bolted from behind the bush and sprinted up the block, the pavement hard against the balls of my feet. I stared straight ahead at the sign, and then the door, not daring to look to either side. The door bounced up and down in my vision, swimming in and out of focus, but drew nearer with each stride. 100 feet, 80, 60. I drew deep breaths, huge gulps of air, and still my legs burned as if fiberglass was growing into the muscles. I pushed myself through the pain and beyond it. It was so close. I could smell the carnality of it. 40 feet, 20, 10. It finally rushed to meet me, and I yanked the door open, crashing into the brightly lit space. I threw my arms around the first person I could find, falling to the floor to kiss his feet. For the first time in what seemed like forever, I was safe, and I knew that they would never be able to hurt me again. That's when things started to get weird. That's the end of chapter 1.
Wow. Such passion and charisma, and just, you're amazing. That's all I can say. You are amazing. And Brian, tell me how awesome it is to hear your book come to life, like real, like life.
Yeah, it's great. It's very different to read it or write it, but when you hear it, it feels a little more real. I can see it happening even better. It's a great job, Mike.
Thank you.
I like the irony in the last line.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when things started to get weird.
Yeah.
That really sets up the book for like, it's going to be a wild ride.
It's just so well written, and there's so many things, you feel so many emotions. And then, as you're just reading and doing these, it's just amazing. Our readers are in for such a treat.
They are. It's a great story, and I had a blast performing it. I say a blast, but it was terrifying at times, but it's really a great piece of work. I mean, it's a great book. So much fun. A lot of meat in those bones, so to speak, as an actor to grab onto. So many different emotions, great character, depth and exploration. And I got to say, Brian, okay, so I'm weird. I don't read the book ahead of time. I go chapter to chapter, so I never know who did it. It helps me as a performer because then I can make everybody a little bit suspicious, because I am actually suspicious of everybody. I did not know who the killer was until the next to last chapter when you revealed it. I had no idea who it was going to be.
How did that make you feel when you found out?
Oh, I was so angry.
You say if an author doesn't make the reader angry at some points, they haven't done their job.
Yep.
Yep. I was furious. It was great. I went for a walk.
I didn't want anyone to be happy with that part of it. There's not that I to like the ending, but just not to be happy. Like, oh, darn it.
I really did like the ending of the book. I thought it wrapped up really well. I liked it. But yeah, I was furious when I found out who the killer was. Yeah, it's a fun journey. So
what's next, Brian? What's in the future? What can we see from you?
Yeah, I've been working on a couple more books. It's hard to find time at times. My kids are getting older, and I've got more family responsibilities. But I've been writing. I've got a couple of books that I'm working on, hoping to get them ready to submit, hopefully within the next few months, and we'll see what happens.
What genres are they?
Still sort of the thriller, psychological suspense genre, not so much murder mystery like the first two, but still in that sort of not necessarily whodunit, but sort of a weird mystery, what's going on kind of books.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if you had any advice to give to up and coming writers, what would you tell them?
Just write. I think that that's the best thing you can do for yourself is just write. You're not going to get anything produced just sitting around trying to come up with ideas. So take what you've got, start writing, even if it ends up at the bottom of a drawer, months down the road. At least you've worked on something, you've gotten some practice, and you've gotten something out there. If you just sit around, and I think it was Stephen King that always says, if you wait for inspiration, you're going to be waiting forever. You just got to write. You've got to put something on the page. Even if you end up scrapping it later, it's not going to hurt you to get it out there.
What would you give to up and coming voice narrators or voice actors? What would you say to them?
It's along the same lines. For audiobook performers, I would recommend taking acting classes first. So having a great voice or being good at reading is nice, but that's the base level skill. You need to be able to put emotion, to be able to give these characters depth. So I would recommend practicing reading out loud and recording yourself and hearing yourself. Because when I first started, I was terrible. But, over time you get better and you practice, but you only do it if you can hear yourself. So, every, phone's got a recording app. Just record yourself doing a chapter and then listen to it critically and listen to it in a way that you see, am I getting the story across? Are the emotions there? Is it interesting? And then improve bit by bit that way. Practice, practice, practice. Make sure you take acting classes and then listen to yourself a lot. My process these days, when I do a book, I go in and I cold read it. So I don't read the chapter that I'm going to perform anymore ahead of time. I go in and cold read it and record my first take to get my raw emotion, to hear the mistakes. And then I listen to it probably half a dozen times or more, so that I can hear it as a listener and see, where can I make this story better? Where can I put some comedy? Where's the depth lacking? What character voice isn't working? That kind of thing. You can hear it critically from yourself and then go in and redo it with your notes and with a renewed focus.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, getting back to being an author, I remember writing on a book forever, my first book. And there was a lot of feints, a lot of, false starts, 2 or 3 pages, and then in the desk drawer. And I ended up with about 20,000 pages of that crap at some point and still didn't know how to write. Okay.
Wow.
So it, it's a journey. And some people are better at it than others, they start out and, maybe they spend a year or two and they develop a novel. Some people takes 20 years, but I mean, everybody's different. Everybody's journey's different on it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You can't give up, If you get those rejection letters, you keep pushing, because
I just got a rejection email today. I submitted one of my published books for inclusion in a program where they were gonna make the books available to some other people, and it got rejected. So, and I was like,
it's part of it, yeah, for sure. As an actor, that happens to me a lot. I actually was asked to do an audition for some dubbing for an animated series, and they specifically sought me out, sent me a note, say, I've heard this thing, please, audition for this. I auditioned, feeling really good about it. I got rejected. It's just part of the game. It's just how it works.
And you just got to keep going. Use that as strength to push you. Just keep going. Don't stop.
Yeah. So keep at it.
Don't be discouraged.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching something on YouTube yesterday about a TV series that I watched, and 3 of the main characters, actually 4 of the main characters, they actually sought somebody else for those parts before they ended up casting, and each one of them were second choice, and it is a successful series.
Yeah, you just never know. You just got to keep.
You never know. You never
just
know.
keep at it.
Today has been fantastic, Brian. Your book is wonderful. Tell your readers where they can find you.
Well, Amazon is probably the easiest place. Books are both the books are on there. Both the audiobooks are on there on Audible. Obviously, everything's on the Pandamoon website as well. Multiple places. If you Google it, you can find it easily. And hopefully you can give it a read and give it a listen. Hopefully end up enjoying it.
And leave a review, please. Reviews are beautiful.
The Unraveling of Brendan Meeks is available worldwide on other channels besides ACX and Amazon. So, look for it wherever you are in the world. Give it a listen. It's a really great story. Just be prepared, because it'll be a little mind-altering at times.
You might have to go for a couple walks after reading it. It's a book that definitely sticks with you. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
As always, you're so wonderful.
Oh, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here. I'm always happy to come on and read and chat. So it's so much fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me as well. It's been fun.
Yes. Aw. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.